Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Welcome to this second video and learning about React and doing JavaScript in React. So on our first page, we kind of set up our basic setup. Now we're going to start, building our first component. So this hello world thing, we could make it a component and start breaking down our, so instead what we'll do is we'll create a component that just will say hello. It's got to be capital hello. And every tag has got to be a closing tag, so you got to put the slash in there. But how does it, I never heard of a hello HTML tag. Where did that come from? Well, React allows you to make components which then get used as HTML tags. So first we'll show you what a functional component would look like. So basically I would just do a normal arrow function. So this would be like, we'll just say const hello const hello equals, then we do an arrow function. Okay, and then you just return what you just return the HTML. So return, in this case, h1 hello world, and then that's it. That should make it a working thing. So we're going to return that JSX piece right there. So let's test it out. So let's go over here. Doesn't like what I did there. Let me take a look at my code. Oh, because it's not capital. Hello. Let's clean up that arrow syntax. That might help, because it's a pretty short block of code, so we don't necessarily need the curly brackets. I want to do one other thing, but first let's do that. Test. It's always good to test things out. And you see what light server is doing. It's actually restarting every time I save a file. And then I think the problem maybe is because hello is invoked before I define it. So let me put hello up here. Save. And that's not doing what we'd like it to do. Just examine my code one more time. Hello. Return h1 hello. Let's double check that the original code is still working. So let's cut that out. Put this in here. Let's see that changes, and then hello world is back. So let's examine this. But essentially this is how it should look, and it works. So const, so again const hello, the name of my component, arrow function with the arrow pointing in, and then what I'm returning. Okay, and there's my function. Okie dokie. Now with that, what I can do is another thing I can do is I can add what's called props. There's going to be two ways of thinking of variables in a React component. There's props and there's state. The way I like to think about it is that props are variables that are passed down to the component from the outside. So basically, if I wanted to pass in props, okay, I would type in, let's say, props, okay, and then instead of hello world, we'll say props.name, and then I should be able to just do name equals Alex, because basically what happens is that when the function gets passed, props is an object, so any property that's passed into the tag gets added to some object called props that's passed into the React component, and then can then be interpolated into your JSX. That's essentially the idea. So you can have as many properties as I want. It'll create the object, but it'll only use the ones that you actually use. So if you got to make sure you know what you want. So I want a name to be passed in, and that should work. Let's take a look. Hello world. Let's refresh. Did I hit save? I don't think I hit save. Save. And there you go. Hello, Alex. Okay, so you could do cool stuff with this. You know, whether because those props can be coming from other variables, like an API call or something. So I can call an API call, grab an object of blog post, pass it in through props, and then that component represent sort of whatever. Now the other way to create a component is to make it a class. So how would that look like? Okay, it would look like this. Same idea, but it'd be like class hello extends component class, which is a class within React. And then that should be pretty much it. And then you have to run this render function. So you have to define this render function. Okay. Okay, so then you define a function here, like so. And then you would do the same thing. Return h1 hello props.name. Now here I didn't actually have to put in props as a property or as a parameter in the function. Why not? The reason is this parent class component already has in its constructor. So technically when you call this hello class, it's creating an instance of this hello class, which inherits the constructor from component, which takes the props object and makes it available. So in that case, you don't have to, define props as a parameter. The basic idea is that whenever you call a component, whatever properties you define, it's going to pass it as an object to that component. So if it's a function, there needs to be a parameter called props defined in the function definition. If it's a class, it's already been defined in its constructor in the underlying React code, so you don't have to worry about it. But this should work. Okay, so let's see here. Let's go over here to check this out. And it still says hello Alex. Let's just make sure that it's working. Oh no, it disappeared on me. Let's find out why. Let's see here, return hello. I think I should probably put a semicolon here. Save. Okay, and that's the other difference between using props as a class, because you are using a property of the class of the class instance. So you need to use this .props.name, not just props.name like you could in a function. Okay, so again, class versus function. A class behaves like a class, and a function behaves like a function. Okay, so this should now be all good. Let's go take a look how that turned out. And let's refresh that. And it's still misbehaving. Okay, so here is the solution. We were extending the wrong parent class. So what you really want to extend is react.component. So if you extend react.component, it all works fine. And again, just like the function type component, it's going to return hello Alex. Okay, so those are the two ways you can set up a component. Now the benefit of being able to do a component class is that now you don't just have access to what's called props that we did earlier, that you passing in the property variable, but you can also create internal already pre-made variables that you might collect from an API call, stuff that you're not passing in through a property, and this is referred to as state. Now whenever a state or prop value changes, the virtual DOM triggers and it's going to re-render that component. So that's why only that part of the website is changing. So that's faster because it's not re-rendering the whole website, just that individual component. That's why you want to break down your website into as many individual components as possible. So that way only the parts that are actually changing need to re-render. So you're only re-rendering small bits of your website, not large chunks of your website, or the worst of all, the whole website itself. Okay, but if we want to use props, we're going to have to do add state. We're going to have to do a couple extra steps. So in order to use state, what we'll need is we're going to need a constructor. So we set up the constructor for the function or the class. And then you need to pass in super. I mean props. Because again, it takes what's being passed in at the instantiation of the class. So basically it's going to pass in props in the constructor, and that's why props is available to the render function. Now you don't need to specify that if you're not going to do this other stuff. It's automatically assumed, but since you're defining your own separate constructor, you need to tell the class that, hey, you're going to use the original constructor too. So that's why you have to type in super props. Super is a special function that basically says we're going to keep the old constructor too. So the old constructor that was already built to take in the props object, that still goes. Okay? And then what you can do is you can define your state. So you would just type in this.state, and then the state property is an object just like props. So you can start adding all your variables here. So let's say I created a variable for name here, and name is Alex. Okay. So there's my constructor. We defined the object this.state, and actually that should probably be this.state equals. Okay, and this is the only time you can define state that way. So later on, if I decide to create functions for this class that change the state, I would have to use this function. I would have to use this, Control Z, this dot set state. Okay, so basically the only time I can do this is here in the constructor. And then outside of the constructor, I'd have to use this dot set state to change the state, which we'll do in a future video. Okay, but basically if I wanted to use that state variable, it now changes to this dot state dot name. So essentially you have two objects available to you in the class component: the props object, and any that gets its properties from any properties that are passed in the HTML tag, and you get the state object if you create it for your tag. And you can actually, and when you do your JSX, you can actually call other components. So if I had another component like hello2, I could call that in here as well. But we'll add that to the next video. So let's save that. Just make sure that all renders fine. Okay, should still say hello Alex if all is well in the world. And it still says hello Alex, yes. But except now it's not calling it from props, it's pulling it from our prop over here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this initial starter into React. We'll be doing some more stuff. And in the next video, we'll probably spend some time taking what we've learned and start building up sort of the initial pieces of our website and go from there. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao. Make sure to check out my website, alexmercedcoder.com.